Chapter 28 Towards National Fiscal Responsibility. Content 1. Purpose 2. Introduction 3. Fiscal Responsibility Commission 4. Medium-term expenditure framework 5. Aggregate expenditure ceiling 6. Application of the Act to the state and local governments 7. Annual budget and the medium-term expenditure framework 8. Budgetary execution and achievement of targets 9. Monitoring budget implementation 10. Public revenue 11. Public expenditure 12. Debt and indebtedness 13. Interpretation of borrowing 14. Chapter review 15. Worked examples. Towards National Fiscal Responsibility. Purpose. After studying this chapter, readers will be able to A. Discuss the institutional and legal framework for fiscal responsibility in public administration in Nigeria, and B. Explain the functions and powers of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. Introduction. In order to strengthen the Nigerian economy, fast-track the tempo of socio-economic development, and ensure value for all resources deployed into physical and intrinsic development. The Nigerian government has been enacting various laws and setting up various legally backed commissions. The Federation Account Allocation Committee, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, and the National Commission on Public Procurement are a few of government agencies established to ensure that its objectives of improving the living standard of Nigerians is achieved. The nation has gone a step further by enacting the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which is aimed at providing for prudent management of the nation's resources, ensure long-term macroeconomic stability of the national economy, and secure greater accountability and transparency. Fiscal Responsibility Commission. This commission was established by the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 to carry out the following functions, among others: A. Monitoring and enforcing the provisions of the Act, thereby promoting the economic objectives of the nation. B. Disseminating standard national and international practices that will ensure greater efficiency in the allocation and management of public expenditure, revenue collection, debt control, and transparency in fiscal matters. C. Undertaking fiscal and financial studies, analysis and diagnosis, and disseminating the results to the general public. Composition of the Commission. The Commission is to consist of A. A chairman who will be the chief executive officer and accounting officer of the Commission. B. One member representing 1. Organized private sector 2. Civil society engaged in courses related to probity, transparency, and good governance 3. Organized labor. C. A representative of the Federal Ministry of Finance, not below the rank of a director. D. One member to represent each of the 6 geopolitical zones. All the members of the Commission shall be persons of proven integrity. Powers of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. The Act empowers the Commission to, among other matters: A. Formulate and provide general policy guidelines for the discharge of the Commission's functions. B. Superintend the implementation of such policy guidelines. C. appoint employees to ensure proper and efficient performance of its functions. And D. Determine the conditions of service of employees and fix their remuneration, allowances, and benefits. Medium-term expenditure framework. The federal government, in consultation with the states, would A. Prepare and submit to the National Assembly a medium-term expenditure framework for the next 3 financial years, on which the National Assembly will deliberate. This would have to be done not later than 6 months from the commencement of the Act. B. Subsequently, not later than 4 months before the next financial year, commences a medium-term expenditure framework for the next 3 financial years will be prepared for the National Assembly's consideration. Contents of the medium-term expenditure framework. A macroeconomic framework setting out the 3 financial years, the underlying assumptions, and an evaluation and analysis of the macroeconomic projection for the preceding 3 financial years. B. Fiscal strategy document setting out 1. Federal government's medium-term financial objectives. 2. The policies of the federal government for the medium term relating to taxation, recurrent expenditure borrowings, lending and investment, and other liabilities. 3. The strategies, economic, social, and developmental priorities of government for the next 3 financial years. 4. An explanation of the financed objectives, strategic, economic, social, and developmental priorities, and fiscal measures. C. An expenditure and revenue framework which will set out 1. Estimate of aggregate revenue for the Federation for each financial year based on the predetermined commodity reference, price adopted, and tax revenue projections. 2. Aggregate expenditure for each of the next 3 financial years. 3. Minimum capital expenditure projection for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. 4. Aggregate tax expenditure projection for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. D. A consolidated debt statement indicating and describing the fiscal significance of the debt liability and measures to reduce the liability. E. A statement of the nature and fiscal significance of contingent liabilities and quasi-fiscal activities and measures to offset the crystallization of such liabilities. The estimates and expenditure in C1 to 4 above should be 1. Based on reliable and consistent data. 2. Targeted at achieving the macroeconomic projection. 3. Consistent with and derived from the underlying assumptions contained in the fiscal strategy document. Preparation of the medium-term expenditure framework. The minister will be responsible for preparing the medium-term expenditure framework. In doing this, he may hold public consultations on 1. The macroeconomic framework, 2. Fiscal strategy document, 3. The strategic, economic, social, and developmental priorities of government, 4. Such other matters as he may deem necessary. The consultation should be open to the public, the press, the citizens, organizations, group of citizens, etc. The minister shall seek inputs from the following organizations: 1. National Planning Commission, 2. Joint Planning Commission, 3. National Commission on Development Planning, 4. National Economic Commission, 5. National Assembly, 6. Central Bank of Nigeria, 7. National Bureau of Statistics, 8. Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission. Aggregate expenditure ceiling. The estimate of aggregate expenditure and the aggregate amount appropriated by the National Assembly for each financial year shall not be more than the estimated aggregate revenue plus a deficit which must not be more than 3% of the estimated gross domestic product, or any sustainable percentage as may be determined by the National Assembly for each financial year. Aggregate expenditure for a financial year may exceed the ceiling indicated above if, in the opinion of the President, there is clear and present threat to national security or sovereignty of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Application of the Act to the states and local governments. States and local governments which desire shall be assisted by the federal government to manage their fiscal affairs within the medium-term framework, annual budget, and the medium-term expenditure framework. The medium-term expenditure framework shall be on the basis for the preparation of the estimates of revenue and expenditure to be presented to the National Assembly. The annual budget must be accompanied by a copy of the underlying revenue and expenditure profile for the next 2 years. B. A report setting out actual and budgeted revenue and expenditure with a detailed analysis for the performance of the budget for the 18 months up to June of the preceding financial year. C. A fiscal target broken down into monthly collection targets. D. Measures of cost control, and evaluation of results of programs financed through budgetary resources. E. A fiscal target document derived from the underlying medium-term expenditure framework, setting out the following targets for the relevant financial year. 1. Target inflation rate. 2. Target fiscal account balances. 3. Any other development target deemed appropriate. F. A fiscal risk document evaluating the fiscal and other related risks to the annual budget and specifying measures to be taken to offset the occurrence of such risks. Budgetary execution and achievement of targets. Matters to which attention should be focused here include annual cash plan. The Accountant General of the Federation shall draw up an annual cash plan in each financial year, setting out projected monthly cash flows. This shall be revised periodically to reflect actual cash flows. Disbursement schedule. The Minister shall, within 30 days of the enactment of the Appropriation Act, prepare and publish a disbursement schedule from the Annual Appropriation Act. Use of appropriation. Sums appropriated for specific purposes shall be used solely for those purposes specified in the Appropriation Act. Environment approval. The Ministry may, in exceptional circumstances and in the overall public interest, recommend to the National Assembly for its approval variants from one subhead account to another within the same head, and without exceeding the amount appropriated to such head of account. Monitoring budget implementation. The Minister of Finance, through the Budget Office of the Federation, shall monitor and evaluate the implementation of the annual budget, assess the attainment of fiscal targets, and report to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission and the Joint Finance Committee of the National Assembly. In implementing their annual budgets, state and local governments may adopt those provisions. Public revenue. A. Estimated revenue shall be broken down by the executive arm of government into monthly collection targets, indicating measures to combat tax fraud and evasion. B. The executive arm of government shall at least 30 days before the deadline for the submission of its budget proposals place at the disposal of the National Assembly the revenue estimates for the following year. C. Any fund due to the Federation from any tier of government may be set off by the Federation in or towards payment or remittance of any sum due to that tier of government from the Federation. Public expenditure. Public sector resources management requires that government annual expenditure be kept below its revenue level, or at worst at par with the annual revenue from all sources, so as to avoid the need to get involved in deficit financing. Sometimes, however, the need to provide a higher level of and high quality socio-economic services to the people may demand increased expenditure. Under this Act, conditions under which this can occur are given here under conditions for increasing government expenditure. A. Any action of government which results in increase in expenditure should be backed up by 1. An estimate of the budgetary or financial impact in the year it becomes effective and in the 2 subsequent years. 2. A statement by the person requesting for the expenditure stating that the increase is consistent with the Appropriations Act and the medium-term expenditure framework. B. Prior budgetary allocation should have been done before granting any advantage or increase of remuneration, creation of posts, or allocation of career structures and admission of personnel. C. All contracts in relation to annual budget execution should comply with the rules and guidelines on 1. Procurement and award of contracts. 2. Due process and certification of contracts. Debt and indebtedness. A. All tiers of government shall borrow only for capital expenditure and human development. Such borrowing should also be on a concessional term with low interest rate and reasonable long amortization period, subject to the approval of appropriate legislative body. B. The public debt as a proportion of national income shall be held at the sustainable level as prescribed by the National Assembly. C. Government may borrow from the capital market. Interpretation of borrowing. Borrowing means any financial obligation arising from A. Any loan including principal, interest, and fees on such loan. B. The deferred payment for property, goods, or services. C. Bonds, debentures, notes, or similar instruments. D. Letters of credit and reimbursement obligations with respect thereto. E. Guarantees. F. Trade or bankers' acceptance. G. Capitalized amount of obligations under leases. H. Agreements proving for swap, ceiling rates, ceiling and floor rates, contingent participation, or other hedging mechanism with respect to the payment of interest or the convertibility of currency. I. Conditional sale agreements, capital leases, or other retention agreements. Chapter review. This chapter dealt with government's commendable move to ensure fiscal responsibility at all levels of public administration and in consonance with the yearnings of the people. It discussed such fiscal issues like the powers and duties of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, medium-term expenditure framework, preparation and implementation of the annual budget, and acceptable conditions for borrowing by any tier of government. Worked examples. Questions. 1. Fiscal Responsibility Commission was established by the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007. A. Give the functions of the Commission as contained in the Act. B. What are the powers of Fiscal Responsibility Commission as stated in the Act? 2. Justify your understanding of the content of the medium-term expenditure framework. 3A. Explain the relationship between annual budget and the medium-term expenditure framework. Then B. What are the matters that should be given attention in budgetary execution to achieve intended targets? Suggested solutions. 1A. The following are the functions of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission as contained in the Act. 1. Monitoring and enforcing the provisions of the Act, thereby promoting the economic objectives of the nation. 2. Disseminating standards for national and international practices that will ensure greater efficiency in the allocation and management of public expenditure, revenue collection, debt control, and transparency in fiscal matters. 3. Undertaking fiscal and financial studies, analysis and diagnosis, and disseminating the results to the general public. 4. Making rules for carrying out its functions under Fiscal Responsibility Act. 5. Perform any other functions consistent with the promotion of the objectives of Fiscal Responsibility Act. B. The powers of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission will include the following. 1. Formulate and provide general policy guidelines for the discharge of the Commission's functions. 2. Superintend the implementation of such policy guidelines. 3. Appoint employees to ensure proper and efficient performance of its functions. 4. Determine the conditions of service of employees and fix their remuneration, allowances, and benefits. 5. Compel any person or government institution to disclose information relating to public revenue and expenditure. 2. The medium-term expenditure framework has the following content. A. A microeconomic framework setting out the 3 financial years, the underlying assumption, and an evaluation and analysis of the macroeconomic projection for the preceding 3 financial years. B. Fiscal strategy document setting. 1. Federal government's medium-term financial objectives. 2. The policies of the federal government for the medium term relating to taxation, recurrent expenditure, borrowings, lending and investments, and other liabilities. 3. The strategies, economic, social, and developmental priorities of government for the next 3 financial years. 4. An explanation of the finance objectives, strategic, economic, social, and developmental priorities and fiscal measures. C. An expenditure and revenue framework setting out 1. Estimates of aggregate revenue for the Federation for each financial year. 2. Minimum capital expenditure projection for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. 3. Aggregate tax expenditure project for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. D. A consolidated debt statement indicating and describing the fiscal significance of the debt liability and measures to reduce the liabilities and quasi-fiscal activities and measures to offset the crystallization of such liabilities. 3A. The medium-term expenditure framework constitutes the basis for the preparation of the estimates of revenue and expenditure to be presented to the National Assembly. B. To achieve set targets in budgetary execution, the attention should be focused on 1. Annual cash plan crafted by the Accountant General of the Federation. 2. Disbursement schedule. The Minister shall, within 30 days of the enactment of the Appropriation Act, prepare and publish disbursement schedule. 3. Appropriation Act, which states that sums appropriated should be used solely for those purposes specified in the Appropriation Act. 4. Veriment approval. The Ministry may recommend veriment from one subhead account to another within the same head. C. An expenditure and revenue framework setting out 1. Estimate aggregate revenue for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. 2. Minimum capital expenditure projection for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. 3. Aggregate tax expenditure projection for the Federation for each of the next 3 financial years. D. A consolidated debt statement indicating and describing the fiscal significance of the debt liability and measures to reduce the liability. E. A statement on the nature and fiscal significance of contingent liabilities and quasi-fiscal activities and measures to offset the crystallization of such liabilities.